So I'm talking with Peter Fenner here in Vancouver, and this is part 2 of our conversation. There's nothing we need to do, so why bother?
About what?
Anything.
I don't really understand the question, because in this moment there's nothing for us to worry about. So what we're doing is we are discovering a state of consciousness within which it's actually impossible to create problems. That's what's happening. There are lots of different layers or levels of consciousness. When we're identified with highly conditioned states of consciousness, then we're relating to what's happening in terms of attachment and aversion. I want this to happen, it's fantastic, I want it to continue, or pushing things away. This is terrible, I can't stand this, I want this to immediately be different. So that's at a coarse level of consciousness. So what we're doing is we're cultivating more refined, or gaining access to more refined states of consciousness, in which when we open into an unconditioned state of consciousness, we can't create a problem. It's impossible to do it. We can't deploy energy in making things right or wrong. And in a way, that's the definition of non-dual awareness. It's going beyond the capacity or the need to make things right or wrong.
That's great. Yes, that clarifies.
Mm.
I have another question.
Please.
It's in another direction.
Good.
And it has to do with belief structures and people's beliefs.
Yeah.
Does this type of work that you're doing, what help people's belief structures? What happens to faith and belief and ideas in this work?
Well, in one way, everything continues in the way that it has, because our conditioning continues, we continue to think and feel and so on. But one thing that happens is that we don't believe our thoughts in the same way that we typically do. It's interesting with our thoughts that we think something, and it's so easy to believe what we think. We think in a way that we are terribly convincing to ourselves. We think this shouldn't be happening to me, and we believe it. So when we open into non-dual awareness, it's possible for those same thoughts to be arising, but we don't necessarily believe them. They just move through as a function of our conditioning, and like we're just still connecting with open, free space and not becoming identified with our thoughts.
So it's identity in relation to thoughts and perceptions?
It's identity, but it's even more radical than that, because in the non-dual traditions, we don't just assume that because we think that we exist, that we do exist. We don't assume that because we think me, I, mine, you, yours, thousands and thousands of times a day, that there is an I, that there is a me. So one of the techniques, going back to your earlier question, is looking at the question of who am I? A traditional form of inquiry that we find not only in Buddhist non-dualism, but in Hindu non-dualism as well. So we look at who is the experiencer of everything that's being experienced. Who is the thinker? Who is the feeler? And if we look at that, this interesting thing happens that we cannot find ourselves. If I try to find who is talking to you at the moment, certainly there are words, there's an awareness of words. If I try to find who is talking, or who is aware, right, of what's happening here in this moment, I can't find myself. It's like I open up in a way that I include everything that is. I can't find the boundary between myself and the world. I can't find a boundary between the inside and the outside. There's a sense in which we become centerless. We can't find a center. And that centerless state includes everything that is.
It's very beautiful. It's McLuhan often quoted the medieval philosophers who talked about God as being an entity with centers everywhere and circumference nowhere.
Yes.
And so it's similar. It's exactly the same thought expressed in other language, isn't it?
It is.
You say no center, they say everything centers.
Yes, or infinite centers.
Infinite centers.
Yeah.
All of which is awareness beyond our limitation.
Yeah.
Whatever we call that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you convey this teaching in language, in experiential work. How do you?
It's
how do you work?
experiential. The work unfolds as a contemplative dialogue. So the mood is contemplative. It's very organic and smooth. Often we enter into states of natural meditation. That's when meditation is happening not as a project, not as something that we're doing, but it's just arising as a natural occurrence with a sense of openness, deep serenity, bliss. So that's natural meditation that emerges when, in a way, we let go of trying to get somewhere. So we're no longer involved in that project of thinking that things are deficient, that things need to be different, and there's something that we need to do. So in a way, what we do in Radiant Mind is we dismantle the path. Sounds strange, but we dismantle the path, which allows us to be at the fruition of the path. When we dismantle the path, then actually we can't say where we are. We don't need to say where we are. But one thing we can say is that there's nowhere further to go. Right? We're no longer on the path. So you could say we've arrived at the completion of the path because it's impossible to take another step. Right? If we think, can I make this better? Can I improve on this in some way? It just does not make sense. It's impossible. It's like that thought just doesn't have any traction. How can we make this better? How can we enhance this? Can we diminish this? No, we can't. And that signals that we are in that state of non-dual awareness.
Thank you.
Thank you.